Hello there, this is Pittsburgh Pat, and I'm here with Ryan Doyle of the Verdigree Table. How are you, Ryan?
Good morning. Cheers, everybody.
Good morning. Coffee cups in hand. It's the morning after. It's the walk of shame. This is the
That's the talk of shame. That is now the name of this show.
that is the name of this segment. This is a recap for Dungeons and Dragons. We play Ryan is the DM. We play in person at a local game shop. Go check out Phil at Game Masters Pittsburgh, GameMastersPGH.com, and buy the new player's handbook from him, which you can only get this art at a game store, right? You can't get this on Amazon. You can't get it online.
Only at your friendly local neighborhood game shop, and it's pretty. I mean, I like the
Yeah,
the other one's good. The other one's
yeah.
kind of like standard D&D fare, right? It feels like your kind of
This looks
generic
like
battle scene.
this looks like gold leaf.
Yes, this one has like filigree, and
It's,
it's like
it's
it's interesting
reflective.
too. It's not my natural vibe to go for like the comfy,
Yeah, it's a
cozy.
long rest.
It's a long rest. They're having tea with a dragon. Like,
And
come
they're having
on.
a little bit of a campfire scene there. I wonder how much of that actually, now that we mention that, is inspired by all the times you have to go to camp in Baldur's Gate 3. You know, I don't know.
Good. That's a good question. We could do a whole series sussing out
Oh
the,
yeah,
the
we
Baldur's
can.
Gate influences on the new revised versions.
And the artwork. We had an interesting comment. So, all right, so this will tie in. So in our campaign, we have some lizard folk that we're dealing with, right? So lizard folk, as Ryan has so wonderfully role played them, they're just kind of alien in the sense that they don't think like mammals, right? So they have a different logic. They're not dumb. They don't go to like higher maybe education institutions. They don't read books. Maybe, they have a different agenda of what their priorities are, and they're not the typical like mammalian society that we see in D&D. So that can make for some interesting like choices, right? But there was a piece of artwork that you saw that
Oh,
portrayed portrayed
that-
lizards with mammaries,
yes.
like
There's a
mammals.
it came up. So so first it's an interesting challenge. It's kind of the opposite challenge because we had this conversation about the elves in Dolmenwood, and like not even the elves in Dolmenwood, but the elves who never left Barry, who've been at a cocktail hour for 900 years. And like,
Yeah,
how do you play something that's like so foreign from your own experience? Um, Lizard folk kind of go in the opposite direction. It's much more like simplistic society and is straight up like this isn't just like a different kind of person. This is like further from that than whatever, a dwarf or a halfling or even an elf who's from another dimension. Like this thing's whole structure is different than yours. How do I make you understand that without being like me lizard dumb? Like I
yeah,
don't want you to fall into that trap of like, oh, we're just gonna outsmart these guys. It's like, no, they're canny. They just don't follow your rules. They just see the world fundamentally differently than you, and like they collectively raise their young, and if one doesn't make it, like maybe some of them would be down to eat it because waste not, want not. Like it's just a different ethical code,
right.
um, and moral worldview. But there is I don't know if it made it anywhere other than Reddit, but there was a kind of a meme flame war for funsies about like, do lizard folk women have boobs in character art? And if you Google that, the answer is often yes. But
Yeah,
I'm firmly on the side of like, no, they're not
yeah,
mammals. There's no mammalian like
right.
fundamental trait there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, trying to determine like if they're, the gender of a bird, if it's not by
right,
its plumage,
right.
you have no idea, like you're just not gonna know. But and so for a lizard, it's probably the same way. Depending on, but anyway, it's funny that these things come up, and the artwork in here is really good. There's some really good stuff in here, but I noticed that they kept some too. So like I was looking at spells and spell shapes, right? So
Mm,
the classic chalkboard where there's the wizard holding the poker and he says the pointer and it says cylinder, like sphere, blah, 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 blah. That's the same artwork as has been around for a while. So that's pretty interesting that they did keep some legacy stuff, and then they added a lot of new stuff too.
And it's interesting because they talked about changing that, and I was like, that's the thing that's going to be the hardest for me to change in like intuitively in my mind. And they didn't do much. They like auras and emanations are new, but like they didn't change it that much. But they did. They get I snap to grid, and that I didn't even realize that was controversial. But if we play on a, I mean, at least when we fight, 90% of the time we are on a battle map. Occasionally it's a hex map.
Right.
Usually it's a grid. And I am of the opinion that like spells, if we're playing with 5 foot squares, then those spells have to conform to those 5 foot squares.
Yeah.
But people will like take a lightning bolt. It's like, well, if I split it down the middle, I can now it's a 10 foot lightning bolt. It's like that, well, that yeah, and it's a 5 foot lightning bolt. You can't do that. But
Yeah.
there's the creators have muddied the waters, let's say, and
There's
I
always
think they've muddied them further.
So there's always, this is a good DM thing. So there's always a tendency for players to, argue a case for their rules to gain advantage for what they want to do, and that's fine. And sometimes as a DM, I know I'll let them argue their case,
Mm.
but then I'll explain why I, why it's not going to happen, why that's not the way it would happen, and then sometimes I let it happen anyway. So I'll
Hmm.
say, well, yeah, okay, well, here at my table, here's how the D&D rules as read are stated, right? Lightning bolts can't be doubled in, halved in thickness and doubled in length. Like you just
Mm.
can't do that, right? However, in this particular fight, this is going to be epic, so I'm going to let you do it. You know what I mean? So, but that's a style of DMing. That's not rules. And I like to make sure that my players know that, because if they're going to play at somebody else's table, which often happens with players that I have, because I do Adventure League and I also teach. So I want them to be aware of that, because I don't want them to say, well, Pittsburgh Pat said, and it's like, yeah, well, he's not on the Wizard of Coast like rules board or whatever. I don't even know if that's a thing, but you know what I mean. So
And those guys aren't at your table. So even if like,
right,
yeah, I don't need everyone on the internet to agree with me.
right.
Um, but it is, yeah, I've had players come in from like clearly like romper room, anything goes sorts of groups, right? Where it's just like, well, if I'm excited enough about it, it should work. It's like, well, I mean, I'll try to meet you in the middle, but
Yeah.
and then I've had people come in like shell shocked from like clearly having played some like Mother May I, D&D horror story game of like they're
Mm.
afraid to step out of line. So it's a spectrum.
Yeah, it is. That's for sure. But this is interesting. So we've got the new book. So we were sitting at the table when we're at level 3, so which in the as we were coming into this, before this book was published, we're going to be at level 3 in the old D&D rules, which is a big deal because you get to pick subclasses for your characters a lot of times, depending on your class. I know I'm playing a rogue, so I was gonna have to pick, and I'm thinking, well, you know, I I was thinking arcane trickster, but my character doesn't have the intelligence required for that. So I was thinking, well, okay, I'll go with swashbuckler, since we're playing, salt marsh. We're playing on the ocean. We're on a boat. Yeah, it fits with the old Errol Flynn kind of thing. Let's do it. And I've got the coordination for that. So, but then I look in this book, there's no swashbuckler
Mm.
like subclass. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's it. So, there's already differences, right? So it's in how to meld those differences together. But one thing I do want to say in defense of the new book is that our one player, Mike, was able to generate a what he thought was going to be a usable character at the table in a relatively short period of time. So that's pretty cool stuff, like being able to sit at a table for 20 minutes and have a character ready. That's awesome, you know?
Yeah, he was using D&D Beyond,
Okay.
and he's experienced, right? But
Yeah, you said he's master tier. He has a master tier subscription or
yeah,
something
so
like
he
that.
has early access. So I should say, if you're watching this, the day it comes out, you can only get the PHB, the new PHB, from your friendly local neighborhood game shop because they are releasing stuff earlier with alternate covers and without. through local game shops, which I really respect. I I make my case when I disagree with what Wizards of the Coast is doing. They are still supporting local game shops and giving them an advantage over themselves in some ways. You can't buy this on D&D on the D&D website yet. They won't ship it for
Right.
another 2 weeks.
Right.
So good on them for that. If you have a certain level of subscription, I think it is master tier. You have access to, if you purchase it, you have access to the new PHB on D&D Beyond as well. Everybody else, September 17th is the official release date. Unless you're watching this from another country, in which case I'm sorry. I've got friends in New Zealand, I've got friends in the UK, and they're gonna be waiting a while.
Oh,
Yeah. For the physical, at least.
yeah. Yeah. That's a bummer. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
international shipping is it's a whole thing.
yeah, and expensive too.
Yes.
That's true. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what happened at the table last night. So we spent a little bit of time sussing out whether or not we were going to use new characters or not. And we decided to basically, I think, go along with with our existing characters.